It is indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be here tonight. Tonight's forum is for Whatcom County Proposition 2023-04, Public Health, Safety, and Justice Sales and Use Tax, also known as Whatcom County's Jail Proposition. Voters will have an opportunity to vote for or against the proposition. The Whatcom County Council passed Ordinance 2023-39 concerning funding for public health, safety, and justice facilities and services. If approved, this proposition would authorize a sales and use tax of 0.2% or 20 cents per $100 for costs associated with a new county jail, behavioral health, supportive housing, public safety, and other criminal justice facilities and services as authorized by state statute RCW 82.14.450. Tonight, we have teams of two representing both sides of this initiative. The for position will be represented by two community members, and I am pleased to introduce you to Peter Frazier and Stephen Gockley. Peter is the chair of the Yes, Safe Jail, Healthy Outcomes Campaign Committee. He's also a member of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, and also was a member of the Stakeholders Advisory Committee, which created the implementation plan that will be on the ballot. And he is joined by Stephen Gockley. Stephen is a retired legal aid lawyer who has been co-chair of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force and a stakeholder in forming the Whatcom Racial Equity Commission, and he also participated at the Stakeholders Advisory Committee to develop the implementation plan. Tonight, they are joined by Josh Soretti and Jason McGill, representing the opponents to the proposition. Josh works as an associate professor of history at Western Washington University, actually history and women, gender, and sexuality, and he is also a board member with the Peace and Justice Center. Jason is the executive director of Northwest Youth Services. He has experience in mental health care and is also a stakeholder in forming the Racial Equity Commission. Let's take a moment and go over our format and the rules for this evening. As Robin mentioned, this is a little bit different than the normal forums held by the League in anticipation of elections. Tonight, the teams will have 5 minutes each for opening statements. Then each team will alternatively be able to question the other team. Each team will get to ask a total of 2 questions of the other side. They will have 1 minute to pose their question. The opposing team will have 3 minutes to answer. After that, I would like to open the forum to questions from our audience, and the speakers from the podium will get 1.5 minutes to answer. Then at the conclusion, each team will make a 1-minute closing statement. The order of opening statements, closing statements, and questions was decided by dice toss earlier this evening. The timers are behind me. They are Michelle Kopsha and Judy Hopkinson. Hello. And they will be tracking the time. The timers will flash a yellow sign when 15 seconds remain and a red sign to signal time is up. I've been corrected. A yellow sign when 30 seconds remain, and a red sign to signal time is up. If the team continues, a bell will be rung, and it means stop talking. We ask the teams be respectful of the time allotted due to the limited amount of time that we have and our desire to include as many questions as possible. Audience members, I would just ask you to please hold your applause until the conclusion of the forum. But with that, we encourage members of the audience to provide written questions for the teams. These questions will be asked of both teams. Ushers are available to pick up your questions and bring them to the screeners at the table to my right. Ushers, you want to stand up and identify yourself? There we go. We've got at least 3 people here ready to take your questions. And then the questions will be screened by League members Minda Ray and Robin Barker, and they are seated over here to my right. They will be screening for legibility and clarity and to avoid duplication. Because questions are being screened, please don't wait until the last minute to submit a question. So with the rules covered, let's get started. Timers, are you ready? Very good. And in terms of opening statements, I believe that we are starting with the proponents of the proposition and that Mr. Gockley is going to be offering that opening statement. So, Mr. Gockley?
Thank you, Jill. Thank you all for being here tonight. When we debate matters of public importance, some of us want to individually pick our own right answer to a problem. After adopting a position, we think our job is done, with no room for more learning or compromise. Instead, November's Proposition 4 to fund a modern jail and expand diversion and treatment started with a careful needs assessment, took community feedback at many points, and then, only then, reached consensus conclusions. This approach thoughtfully and pragmatically tackled a very complex problem while respecting differing perspectives in the community. Several factors support that ballot initiative. The process used here is important. A stakeholder advisory committee, officials and citizens with experience working to prevent and reduce incarceration, joined by other residents who just wanted to help our community function better, met for months of study and discussion. Meetings were open, public comments were considered, social media surveys sought input, focus groups heard BIPOC individuals, tribal members, people who have been incarcerated, and their family members. Key informant interviews were held. A town hall was conducted. Hundreds and hundreds of county residents contributed to this process. Revisions were made in response to this input. The 2023 process was not at all like 2015 and 2017, where a few officials emerged from a back room with predetermined plans for a larger jail and nothing else. The 2023 proposals are very different from prior years, too. They seek coordinated reforms in multiple systems that have not served any of us well, including law enforcement, the courts, jail programs, and treatment interventions. The initiative will fund an integrated set of projects, both buildings and services, to strengthen public safety, but equally to expand historically inadequate assistance for people kept in jail for lack of effective alternatives. Projects provide clear goals, but don't yet include every detail for achieving them. That's just common sense. No long-term multi-project endeavor could offer such details this far in advance. We will need that flexibility to adjust along the way. The Justice Project Implementation Plan relied on best practices and available evidence. It used a recognized framework to identify when we can limit incarceration and better provide community supports. The plan heeds new developments, like the increases in serious crimes and the rise of the incredibly dangerous drug fentanyl. Planners understood we can't require most people to enter treatment, and many in these systems refuse to participate, at least at first. The plan acknowledges the struggle treatment providers face to maintain current service levels, let alone to expand them. It also emphasizes more robust data systems and transparency. And learning from past feedback, the proposals promote accountability through ongoing community oversight and community involvement. Progress will not be cheap, but we already spend a lot each year without making enough difference. Voluntary contributions from the cities will responsibly limit the amount of any financing bond. The plan has dedicated funds in hand and additional financial commitments to start building treatment capacity, and political commitments to seek systems changes that help more people in better ways. The proposed projects can't be done without this tax revenue. and they can't be done in one system we like, but not others. This work needs to start now. Rejecting the initiative would prolong today's untenable situation, an inhumane jail and insufficient treatment options. Proposition 4 has strong backing from every jurisdiction using these systems. Now it needs a strong yes vote next month from you. I encourage you to read the implementation plan and look at the YES website for the views of knowledgeable and compassionate behavioral health and law enforcement personnel. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Soretti.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. Whatcom County needs to chart a new course on public safety, and we're voting no in November on Proposition 4, the jail tax, because it's basically the same plan that voters rejected in 2015 and in 2017. If there had been a robust process of public input in which the public had actually had their input incorporated into this plan, we wouldn't once again be seeing a 0.2% sales tax to build a big flat jail up on LeBounty Road. The problems with this proposal are many. It's the wrong funding mechanism, it's a bad location, and there are no guarantees that we'll actually get any of the needed services out of this. In terms of the funding mechanism, we're talking about increasing the sales tax after years of record inflation. Working families, people who are renters, students, and others here in Whatcom County cannot afford increasing the sales tax on them right now. Sales tax is highly regressive. It falls hardest on the people with the lowest income because they have to put the greatest proportion of their income towards those purchases. It's also, this proposed plan, Proposition 4, is a really bad location. Moving the jail miles away from the courthouse out to LeBounty Road will have a number of operational impacts and a number of impacts both here and up there. It's not a good idea to separate the jail from the courthouse where people need to be brought for hearings and trial. It's also not a good idea to take hundreds of jobs here out of downtown and move them away and force people into longer commutes. We're talking about more congestion on I-5, more needs for the county to invest in transporting people back and forth, and more trips for many people who have to go up there for work and park in a big flat parking lot that they're going to pave over wetlands that sit in the delta of the Nooksack River. I encourage you to look at aerial photos from the October 2021 floods and see and think about if you would build a place where you want hundreds of people to live right at the mouth of that river, knowing that those 100-year floods are now predicted to happen every 25 years. The LeBounty Road site is a green space, it's wetlands, it should not be developed. If you're an environmental voter, if you're against sprawl, you should vote against Proposition 4 based on the location alone. Also, this jail tax is a really bad bet on our future. For the first few years, it's guaranteed that no funding will go to services. Read the proposal, read the actual proposal. They're going to make sure that they're really choking off services for years. So even though the proponents say that this is going to increase the amount of services, it's not really actually focused on that. If we are having a behavioral health crisis, then we should invest in behavioral health. And if we're having a drug addiction crisis, we should invest in drug treatment. Why would we think that a jail is going to solve all of these problems? It's a really unrealistic approach given the way that many services have exceptionally long wait lists, and there are many bottlenecks and pain points in our criminal legal system that won't be resolved by simply expanding the capacity of the existing jail. And that's the vision. That's why they want to build up on LeBounty Road, so that they can have a space that's not only going to be a 440-bed jail built sometime in the next 7 years, but additionally, they want to build more spots up there. And that's why that site has been selected. So the idea of investing in endlessly expanding the incarceration capacity of this county is the wrong bet for our future. We need to think about the sort of threats we're facing and actually assess what would solve that. For a long time, this country relied very heavily on incarceration as a solution to all of our problems. And in recent years, people have really started questioning that. It is not the time for Whatcom County to lock itself in to a 30-year bond that they'll take out to build this jail, and then the endless operational expenses of this place. We need to have a plan that actually focuses on the threats we're facing. I'll also say that this has no plan to address the massive racial inequalities that exist in this jail. Black and Indigenous people are incarcerated at 6 to 8 times the rate of white people in this county, and what they want to do is increase the number of incarcerated people. So they want to worsen the racial injustice that goes on in this jail by expanding its capacity. They have no plan to address any of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Appreciate your statements. And we'll start with the pro side. Would you have a question for the opponents?
Guys, as you may know, state law allows involuntary behavioral health treatment only in extreme circumstances. All other treatment must be voluntary. Many individuals facing criminal charges refuse any treatment, including medications. In fact, many of those individuals adamantly deny they have any behavioral problem at all. How will you provide community behavioral health treatment for persons who face criminal charges but will not participate in treatment? What alternative steps would you plan to take for those who refuse treatment if you are not willing to detain them?
I took the whole opening statement, but I'll just start on this and say that what we need to recognize in this case that there are many ways that people might come into the system, and that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. A jail is certainly not a solution to that. A jail is not a therapeutic setting, and it's not a place where we should be investing in treatment. Instead, we should be thinking about improving the options for people to access treatment outside of the carceral system.
Will I follow up?
No, not at this time. Now, at this time, from the opponents, do you have a question for the proponents?
Yes. Ooh, I got it. How does the proposition address and plan to decrease the racial disparities of the jail population?
Complicated question, one that the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force has been dealing with almost from the get-go. It was one of the first public bodies in Whatcom County to address that issue head-on after the Vera report. I see out in the audience Lieutenant Caleb Erickson, who has been working on the data systems that show some racial disparities. We have sort of hit a slow spot in that, and so the implementation plan, we don't have all the data we want to make sound policy decisions in terms of racial equity and to monitor the performance of our programs. So that's one of the targets of the implementation plan, is to build those data systems, to share data, to share it both across stakeholder agencies within the criminal legal system and with the public, so you can tell how a plan is doing. Racial inequities permeate our whole society and all of its institutions and structures. I'm not telling you anything new there. We can reduce inequities in the local criminal legal system, but we can't eliminate them as long as they continue in the wider world just by addressing one sphere. I will also say the Stakeholder Advisory Committee sought input from affected populations on measures that we could take. We didn't get a lot of take-up on those efforts, so we hired a contractor to make connections with communities that have historical adverse experiences with the criminal legal system. We incorporated as much as we could there. I'll also emphasize that historically adversely affected communities are not monolithic voices. We got quite different feedbacks from people of color, tribal members, and so forth. Some wanted more emphasis on incarceration, some wanted less. So this is an ongoing problem. It's a societal problem as well as a criminal legal problem. Our eyes are on it, and we will continue to work on that.
Thank you. And I want to encourage the audience to bring your questions or send your questions forward. And at this time, we have a question for both sides. And we'll start with the proponents, which is that the public has been told that the cost of construction could be $100 million. We have heard $137 million, and we have also heard that the cost could be $150 million. We've also heard that the number of cells and the capacity for this proposition, for this jail, has not yet been determined. And the question for both sides is it fair to ask the public to vote on a measure when cost and size have yet to be determined? So starting with the proponents.
The number 137 million comes from an estimate process that was done to compare the three different sites, one just to the south of us in this building, one at Iron Gate, and one at La Bounty. To get an estimate, a size needed to be chosen, and 440 beds was what was used. And 137 million is an estimate in today's dollars. It could well be that it will cost more because of interest rates or the cost of construction. The second part of the question was,
is it fair to ask the public to vote
yes.
on a measure when size and cost have yet to be determined?
Yes, absolutely it is. There's a large process like this, a large project, requires an estimate process, and then as you get closer to the to design, that is where you decide on the exact size, and then you can get much better estimates closer to the date of design, or closer to the date of construction. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll just add the $100 million figure comes from
Oh, you got, well, thank you for obeying.
following the rules.
Yep.
Figure out a way to roll around it. We want to make sure that we're getting full answers to everything, but we're going to allow the people who are the opponents to answer this question.
Could you repeat the question once more, Jill?
I can.
Thank you.
The public has been told that the cost of construction could be $100 million. It could be $137 million, and we've also been told it could be $150 million. And we've been told that the number of cells and the capacity for this jail have not yet been determined. The question is it fair to ask the public to vote on a measure when cost and size have yet to be determined?
Absolutely not fair. But more importantly, it would be very unwise for the voters to write the county a blank check like that. If the county wants to engage in a capital project, there should be a budget. There shouldn't be some pie-in-the-sky guesses with 50% variation in them before we're committing to building this very large and potentially much more expensive facility than that. This is a really bad time for the municipal bond market. We probably, all of you know, interest rates are really high right now. It's an unwise time to borrow a huge amount of money for a capital project. And so it would be a real mistake to give this blank check, and this open-ended capacity is also of enormous concern. If we're voting on a jail and the construction of a new jail, we should know what size it's going to be. We shouldn't have to simply trust that the politicians are going to do the right thing or make the right choice. And if you look at many public projects that have been proposed in recent years, we can see that the estimates were laughably small compared to the actual cost of construction. That's another reason this is an unrealistic plan and one that the voters should be really, really skeptical of.
You know what else is not fair? You were told you'd have 2 opportunities to ask a question of each other, and I only gave you 1 opportunity. So let me try to remedy the problem at hand. And proponents, would you like to ask your second question of the opponents? And accept my apologies, please.
So our jail is full, and offenders are often booked and released and not even charged. Our prosecutor now declines to charge some crimes, and courts have reduced issuances of warrants. However, officials indicate many more serious crimes are occurring than before. Virtually all those now held in jail are charged with serious felonies, and their diversion is not possible. What specific actions would you take with all these people to protect the safety of the community?
I think to answer that question, you're looking for a solution that really involves the community's input. And I just want to go back to the point of, since I didn't get a chance to follow up what Josh said on that question, I do believe that it needs to be noted and pointed out that the new jail is attempting, what we're trying to vote on is really just more about a bigger jail, because we're talking about 440 cells, and I think the community needs to understand what that means. 440 cells means that we're going to double that. So you're really talking about 1,320 beds. Our crime is actually decreasing at this point. And to go back to the question, I do believe that in order to solve whatever the crime is, we really need community input on really how to design that. And we haven't done that process. We have not been through that process yet. So I just really wanted to stress, again, we need the community to help design what that system would look like, because we're really re-envisioning what this community would look like without a bigger jail, without the incarceration system in its entirety. Again, community policing is important. So yeah, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, and I would just add that even when the jail was not at capacity, there was crime. There were people who were cycled in and out of the jail, and that all of these problems that the imagined solution is building a new jail, all of them existed when there was capacity, and they exist in places where there is plenty of jail capacity, right? Then there are plenty of places in Washington, the SCORE facility down in Des Moines, the Skagit County Jail, the Yakima County Jail. They have plenty of jail capacity. They have crime there too. And so this is not a reasonable solution, right? And we need to think about ways that we could actually address the drivers of crime and the things that people need, the things that drive addiction, people's inability to access treatment, the lack of supportive and affordable housing here in Bellingham. These are all ways that we could actually reduce property crime, reduce homelessness, reduce drug addiction, as well as reducing overdoses. A jail is not going to do any of those things, because a jail has never been able to do those things. And all of those problems, again, happen in places that don't have booking restrictions. So the idea that building a much larger jail is going to solve any of those problems is denying the reality that we see just even down the road in Mount Vernon.
The opportunity is now for the opponents to ask their second question of the proponents.
Did you have a question? Okay. All right, I have lots of questions, but I'm trying to figure out which one is the best one to ask in this situation. Considering that 2/3 of jail residents are incarcerated because they cannot afford bail, how does the proposal for the new jail ensure we aren't just locking up more people from for being poor?
Well, let's be clear, because I don't think opponents have quite understood the pretrial population, which has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years as we've seen much more serious crimes. 90% of the people, or all of the people in the jail right now, are being held on felony charges, very serious crimes. Most of them have prior felony crimes on their records, so these are multiple offenders. Most of them, or about 50% of them, have serious mental illness. More than that, 80% perhaps, have a substance use disorder. All of them have had their individual cases screened by a judicial officer who has found that releasing them at that point places the public safety at considerable risk, and it's not something they want to do at that moment. So we're talking about a population that is not what it was when the Vera report was issued in 2017 or 2018, and we had a lot of low-level people who were basically lingering in jail because of poverty issues. They couldn't afford higher bails. We have lower bails now. We have a lot of personal recognizance releases, but we have a lot of serious crime that we didn't have a few years ago. That is what's clogging up our jail. So whatever Skagit County's situation is like is not relevant to us. We don't have a place to put a stream of people coming in with those serious crimes. And that's why you didn't get an answer when we asked what specific actions they would take for people who couldn't be admitted to the jail. There aren't any.
So this next question is, we're going to start with the opponents. And there are news reports quoting County Treasurer Steve Oliver expressing his support for a new jail and saying that we could not spend more than $100 million without destabilizing the county's budget. How do you think that this should affect the voters' decision?
It's another reason that it's fiscally irresponsible to try to build this facility, and it's another reason that every voter should be voting no on the jail tax. The idea that they could actually get this facility constructed at the level that the treasurer suggests is unrealistic. This won't be a $100 million facility. And so they're asking you to really, again, sign this blank check that is then potentially going to lock the county in to unsustainable debt service. And that debt will be serviced before we get any services from the county at all. The county already spends two times as much on justice and on criminal justice than it does on services. And so we've already got an imbalance in what we're spending, and what we see is an attempt to unbalance that equation even more. And that's another reason that we need to vote no on this and ensure that we're not pumping all of this money and really making a promise, right? Taking out a bond, a mortgage for 30 years that we're all going to be on the hook for paying before we can get anything else out of our county government.
And for the proponents, how would you answer the question?
I would recommend that our friends to the left of me would read the implementation plan, the ordinance, and our website at yeswhatcomjail.com, because all of these questions are answered. It is not, we're not, the $100 or $100 million figure is what we're going to get the bond payment or the bond down to. And we have a plan for how to do so. And over the first 4 to 6 years, the cities, who will be receiving 40% of the $14.2+ million per year, will be giving half of that back to our county to pay down the bond so that the payment, or rather the bond itself, is $100 million, which is something we absolutely can afford. I would also take this opportunity to say that the $100 million dollar bond and the $14.2 million plus each year is half, the spending is half on the jail and behavioral care facility and half on the important behavioral health and facilities and programs that you see in the implementation plan. Stephen, do you have anything to add?
I'll just say that, sorry, I'll just say I saw the stop sign.
Those timers are serious. There are many people who need mental health and substance abuse treatment services who are not a part of the inmate population or criminally involved. How will siting services on the campus of the new jail affect their ability to access services? And I think we're starting with the proponents this time.
What we have are two non-functional systems, the criminal legal system and the behavioral health treatment system. We're trying to build out, especially the behavioral health treatment system, which means new components. We have the Ann Deacon Center for Hope as a crisis stabilization center. Previously, law enforcement had to take people in behavioral health crisis either to the emergency room or to the jail. This is an alternative. We have $9 million for a 23-hour crisis respite center that we will be building as a short-term de-escalation kind of thing. There are other things that we need. A contingent from Whatcom County went to Nashville and viewed their system, which has been quite successful, and learned ways in which they might even improve their system. And it included a behavioral care center, which was connected to programmatically with the jail, but was not part of the jail. A whole different level of care, kind of care, in a very humane environment was done there voluntarily. That's what would be available or possible at the LaBounty site, but nowhere else. We could build reentry housing on the LaBounty site as well. So there are a number of services that we don't have, and we went through this analytical process in the stakeholder advisory group to determine what those pieces were that we need to create or expand in the current behavioral health treatment system.
And opponents.
Building services only within the jail is a really bad idea, and I think that the proponents of this measure have really shown the future they want to build for us. So I encourage anyone to Google what zip code in this country has the highest incarceration rate, and that's Nashville. That is what their vision for the future is, the highest incarceration rate in this entire country. They want to take ideas from a place where the racial disparities and police violence are worse than anything we've ever seen here in Bellingham. And that's their model that they're using and talking about and bragging about and saying, we should do it like Nashville is doing. Well, let me say, we should not do it like Nashville is doing. They are not the model, and that is not what I want to see. We should be trying to continually reduce our incarceration rate. There are a number of ways that programs have come online in recent years that are really promising, and we're not even giving them a chance to open before they want us to commit to buying into this model of the highest incarceration rate in the entire country. So I encourage you to look at the system they have in Nashville and think about if that is what we should move towards if we care about things like racial justice, or if we don't want to just put more people in cages and behind bars.
So this will start with the opponents. Again, about location. The location that's been identified on the Bounty Road is in a floodplain. And what implications does this hold for the proposed plan?
As I said in my opening statement, the LaBounty Road location is enough reason to reject this proposal.
And Mr. Soretti, I'm going to just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to add another little piece to this. How will environmental impacts for this new facility be measured and addressed, if you know? I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
That's all right. As I said before, this is a bad choice in terms of siting in a number of ways, and the environmental impacts are multifaceted, really. You know, we're talking about developing a space that's in the floodplain. We're talking about developing a space that is currently a green space and currently is surrounded on all sides by wetlands. It's not a place that should be developed for housing. It's not a place that should be developed for anything. It should be left green. And that alone, right, is a good reason to vote against this. But the environmental impacts also come with developing this place that is in part the charnel yard from a closed tannery, and so we don't know what kind of toxins might reside down in that soil. We also don't know how much worse we're going to see traffic out there at La Bounty and Sunset, on I-5, on those exchanges, and then also downtown where people will have to be driving back and forth from the courthouse, from other things that are downtown, back and forth up to those big flat parking lots that they're going to pave over all of that green space. So yes, if you're an environmental voter, you should be voting against Proposition 4, and that alone is a good reason for anybody to reject this plan.
And to the proponents.
So I don't know where this idea that the La Bounty property is in a flood zone came from. It is absolutely not correct. I double-checked with the county today. It is not within a flood zone. The La Bounty property is highly appropriate for this facility because we can build a horizontal, right-sized jail and behavioral care center, and then and when I say right size, I'm talking about if it were to be 440, that is just 20% over what our capacity is that we're running currently. There will be a formula that's going to be used to decide what the appropriate size is, and there's an oversight committee to do that work that will have plenty of input. So I would also like to say that we went to Nashville to look at that model of the behavioral care center because that is what is admirable in Nashville. We did not go there because it is they're jailing at a highest rate in the country. They have an excellent model. Dr. Eric Botter did a great job with the behavioral care center model. It is appropriate for Whatcom County, and it will help us divert people with mental health and substance use disorder issues, appropriately treat them outside the jail.
And another question about location, which is that the location on La Bounty Road is a rural location at a distance from services, a distance from the city center in Bellingham. What is this plan for the safe release of inmates in the middle of the night and for getting people where they can safely return home?
That's a great question. And the Sheriff's Department has assured us that nobody is going to be walking down the street at night. I mean, the people are not going to be released and with no transportation to where they need to go. That is simply not going to happen, and WTA will be offering routes for the public to get to the facility, which is about 12 minutes from here. It is not that far away. Stephen?
We have actually had conversations and commitments from WTA to greatly expand their routing schedule so that will be a key transit point for them. It will not be isolated like one could argue it might be now.
Opponents?
None of that is in the plan. There are no guarantees or promises that any of that will happen. If you're a WTA rider, you know that if somebody on their Google Maps says it takes me 10 minutes in my Tesla, that it's probably going to take you an hour to get there. There is a number of impacts on the people who will live in that facility, on their families, on their community, and on the people who work there and will have to work around that facility. And all of it is about fracturing our civic center and moving one piece of it out to a space that shouldn't be developed. It's going to create a lot of difficulty and a lot of needs for just believing that there will be funding there for the WTA to change those routes and to concentrate. And if the WTA had committed to that, we would see a memorandum of understanding. This is all speculative, okay? And the impacts of moving it up to Labounty Road are too many to take a gamble on that move.
And for the next question, we'll start with the opponents, which is that a big problem in our current facility lies in the backlog of human beings who are seriously mentally ill, who are awaiting restoration of competency and evaluations at Western State Hospital. These individuals require extra space as they are often held in isolation and extra resources and attention due to the severity of their illnesses. These individuals are awaiting space in a state facility. Should the county voters build this new jail in order to resolve this problem, or are there any other mechanisms available to deal with this situation?
Yeah, so competency restoration is a really serious issue that is creating much longer jail stays. Somebody who is awaiting competency restoration is someone who's been judged by a medical professional of being incapable of understanding the charges against them. And these people are truly, truly some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And instead of trying to give them a better life, what we're really doing is talking about trying to warehouse them away forever. We absolutely need to make adjustments to our system, not just here in Whatcom County, but this is a statewide problem and has to do with long backlogs to get that. We need to work to make sure that our state officials are investing, that the state takes care of its responsibility to get these people the mental health care, drug addiction treatment, or whatever it is they need so that they're able to live a full, fulfilling life. We're talking about, and I know very often when we talk about the jail population, people imagine them as strangers that they don't know, but we're talking about people in our families. We're talking about people who are truly not apart, but are very much in places that, but for fortune, any of us could be in, okay? And so we don't want a system that warehouses them away forever. We want to have a system where people can get the treatment and care and the resources they need without having to be arrested first.
And to the proponents.
With all due respect, I'm going to be blunt and say that is simplistic and uninformed opinion that Josh just fed out there. No one is considering warehousing people awaiting competency restoration. And it shows a lack of understanding of a lot of the work that's been going on for the last couple of years. This is a multi-year process. In 2015, the state was sued for failing to provide adequate competency restoration services, the state being the Department of Social and Health Services, which runs Western State Hospital, the only place where the competency evaluation and then competency restoration can occur right now. They were ruled against them, found to be liable in a class action lawsuit. They continued to fail to provide those services, paying tens of thousands of dollars in penalties to the court for that failure. Just recently, earlier this year, they paid a $100 million penalty for continuing to be out of compliance with the agreement. We have been working for the last year with our legislators, with DSHS, and with other partners to try to find authority to provide services locally. When we wouldn't provide those in the jail probably, but they would need to be in a secure place because, humane or not, these people were charged with some serious crime and they're probably not safe. That's why competency restoration is an involuntary commitment. They're not safe to release into the community. We're working on that problem.
So our very last question, and we'll start with the proponents. It appears that all of the county sales tax resources for capital projects will be required for this jail proposition, assuming it is approved. Should this project proceed with the understanding that it will be in lieu of or to the exclusion of all other projects known today and those that may arise in the foreseeable future?
Oh my goodness, no. That's a mischaracterization. The implementation plan should be read. It's a 15-project plan. The jail and behavioral care center is just one part of it. Other facilities are planned. And it's simply as simple as that. The 23-hour crisis center is certainly one of those that's being planned, and there is also in the implementation plan a process for figuring out a good inpatient treatment facility as well. Am I missing any facilities from the plan? But that's 3 right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to the opponents,
You repeat the question?
can I try? Yes.
Thank you.
It appears that all of the county's sales tax resources for capital projects will be required for the jail proposition, assuming it is approved. Should this project proceed with the understanding that it will be in lieu of all other and to the exclusion of all other projects known today and those that may arise in the foreseeable future?
Well, I think it's hard to predict what may arise in the future in a lot of ways, but what we know is that building a new jail will be an enormous expense. It'll be a huge expense that we can save on by not doing it, by not building it. And that's the best way to save $150 million plus. If we build this jail, it is going to gobble up a huge portion of the county budget and the revenues for a long period of time. And it's going to lock us into having to incarcerate more people than are currently incarcerated for a very long time. Though if the next facility is maintained like the current one, we'll be here in less than 30 years to start talking about having to build another facility and having to take out another sales tax in order to do that. And so I think that when we look at the county's record in terms of maintaining its buildings, that this jail that is younger than I am is apparently crumbling, even though we have many buildings in this city and many of us live in buildings that were built before 1984. We have an 1858 territorial courthouse that's still structurally sound. But somehow, right, we've got to just trust that the county is going to be fiscally responsible, build a reasonable sized facility, and maintain it and operate it in a way that doesn't result in huge overages.
And sadly, it's time for our closing statements. It feels like we could continue this conversation for a long time, but we have in fact run out of our allotted time. And so let's start with the proponents. And I think that Mr. Frazier, you're going to offer the closing.
Thank you. 45 years ago in this country, we deinstitutionalized our mental health system. A community-based form of care was meant to replace it. Without a properly funded local infrastructure, people with mental health and substance use disorders ended up on our streets and in our jails. Through great community effort, we are building a network of care and now have a roadmap to create our own local and regional response with well-considered reforms and innovations. This levy is the prime funding mechanism to make that a reality. Meanwhile, our jail is full of people charged with serious felonies, and many repeat offenders are being released to the streets. For the sake of public safety, we cannot wait any longer to build a modern jail. This plan stops wasting millions of dollars on a failing and inhumane jail that is dangerous and unhealthy, replacing it with a safe, modern jail and behavioral care center. Please vote yes in November.
And for the opponents, I think that it is Mr. McGill. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to want to talk to our fellow love warriors out there. Regardless of the outcome of this vote, time spent interacting with the criminal legal system causes major disruptions to the lives of young people and their loved ones. Building a new, bigger jail is merely a superficial answer to a safer Whatcom County, and spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make a damaging and harmful system look more humane is a waste of our community's time and resources. It's been proven. There's data that sticks to this. A disproportionate number of poor, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and houseless folks are currently in the Whatcom County Jail. And we know from other county jail expansions, like Skagit County's jail expansion, that more space does not lead to more arrests, or more space does lead to more arrests and incarceration, but doesn't actually lower rates of crimes. The Whatcom County Council has made sure to include language in the jail sales tax proposal that would automatically authorize and trigger further expansion of facilities on the massive property owned by the county on LaBounty Road in Ferndale, which, when capacity thresholds are met. I will stop. Repair, not rebuild. Thank you.
Well, a deep feeling of gratitude is from the League of Women Voters to all four of you for preparing and presenting tonight and helping to better inform the community. This is an important question, and I know lots of people are still wondering how best to cast their ballots, and that we appreciate you offering them factual information this evening. And to those of you listening, each of the people up on the podium have offered you other websites to look at these questions in more depth so that you can cast a fully informed ballot in November. So I want to say that voters, you can find out more about all of this at vote411.org and in your voter pamphlet. You need to know that your ballots will be mailed on October 18th of 2023. Your ballot must be postmarked or in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on November 7th, 2023. And please remember to sign the ballot envelope. And if mailing by postal service, we recommend mailing early. Now, I'm going to ask all of you to go nowhere because this is only half of our night. It's full of information. As soon as I leave the podium, I'm going to be replaced by Cislina Ledbetter, who will be presenting a forum with the candidates for Whatcom County Sheriff. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to all of you who are listening this evening.